Hey everyone, Tactics here with my second Keystone Hero Route Walkthrough, where in this video, I'm going to be taking you through a +10 Dawnbreaker key from week 1 of the season, showing off the route that we use, the order for the mini-bosses that I've had a lot of questions about that specifically, and just how to handle the various trash and boss pulls that we do in this dungeon. I'll be putting videos just like this one out for all 8 dungeons of the season. Mist is already out, and we'll be having the rest of them out over the next week or so, so make sure you are subscribed if you're interested in those. Otherwise, let's just get into it here. This is on 1.25 times speed just for brevity, and we've got a big pull off the top here right at the beginning of the dungeon with Bloodlust and CDs here. Actually, I think we did forget to bloodlust this one. Let's go. There we go. I do recommend bloodlusting this one. I think we forgot to bloodlust this one. That's okay. Kicks in this pull, basically group it up. If you have curse dispels, you can kind of ignore the Shadow Mage's Ensnaring Shadows kick and commit dispels to that, and instead kick the Night Bolts that can help reduce the damage in this phase, or in this pull rather, especially if you are getting quick curse dispels out on those shadows, especially because Tormenting Ray deals quite a bit of damage, and bolts into any Tormenting Ray target can be quite scary, so be aware of those. Otherwise, pretty straightforward pull here. Mostly just tank buster mobs, which you can purge their buff off of them whenever they cast Dark Blade. They get this stacking buff on them, as you can see there, so you can purge that if you need it. But at least on the 10 key level, it didn't seem too scary, those mobs, just yet. But potentially going up in the key levels, especially above 12, once there's that extra scaling factor, it could be a bit difficult. If you ever get the bug, by the way, where a player can't see the boat and the boat doesn't progress forward anymore, it did used to happen. I don't know if they've totally fixed that, but if you ever get that bug, that player just needs to zone out of the dungeon and then zone back in, and then everything should start moving forward, and they should spawn back in on the boat. So just as a note here. On the boat here, only 6 mobs are actually real. Everything on the outer edge here, those are all like fake mobs. Don't need to worry about them. I don't even think they give count, so ignore them. And we just pull this commander over slightly to the 3-pack in the corner here. You can do back-to-back like 6 target pulls, which is kind of your max, right? You're literally pulling all of the trash in this area with the 2 pulls we've done so far. And again, same deal as the previous one. You need 1 kick on the commander's cast, but otherwise, if you have cursor spells, put kicks into the bolts, spare kicks into the bolts, and then just dispel the actual curse. And otherwise, though, it's just a lot of random target damage in this pull, especially with the ritualist rays, right? Those are the most dangerous moments. When Ray goes out, that's when you would want to pop a defensive. Stygian Seed's also kind of scary. That's a magic dispel. So of course, if your healer is your curse dispel, they don't have a curse dispel, right? They need to be using their dispel on that one. So be aware of all that. And then once these guys are dead, we're going to fly to the boats here, waiting for our flight. We just go to I think the top boat is always there first, and then the bottom boat is there afterwards. So we just go here because it's quicker. Nothing too much to talk about here. This guy just straight up bolts the tank only. Bursting Cocoon actually ticks quite hard. So that in these pulls is what you would want to defensive as a DPS player or a person targeted by that. Because again, same deal. There is that caster in this pack, and they are doing random target bolts. And so combo of those with the web debuff is quite scary. Second one is the same, except there's a commander here, which you need to kick on. Just make sure you get that. And then we fly back to the boat for the first boss here. I think we just end up lusting this because we realized at this point that lust wasn't on CD. In general, I think this boss is kind of a bad lust because you have that kind of intermission phase in the middle. And I mean, on high enough tyrannical keys, it'll last, but I still do like lusting that first pull there. For this boss, my recommendation is to have your ranged kind of stack away from your group, because the collapsing night cast is prioritized on range. So if you have multiple range players in your groups, if you have 2, at least 2, it'll always spawn on them. It'll never spawn on melee, which means for our comp here, every single one of the collapsing knights is going to spawn 1 on our resto shaman and 1 on our evoker. Always. That's what you know that for sure. And so what you would want to do in this case is those players can just kind of stack up on top of each other at range, and then when the actual collapsing knight goes out, they're both out there, and they can just move in forward or to the side or whatever a bit, and then the melee stack never needs to adjust too much. Now I think this ends up going a little bit wrong and we get some baits closer to melee, but that's the kind of idea. If you have 2 ranged in your group, which is ideal for this boss, you can just stack up out range. If you only have 1 ranged or you have 0 ranged, you're going to have to move the boss aggressively every time collapsing knight goes out, because it's always going to spawn right on top of you. So it's going to come out in a second here, and you can see like they're stacked up over there. He took a step in, I think, Evoker short arms, but that's okay. We just take a few steps away and we have all this empty space out here. The Shadow Bolt, I believe, only hits the tank, so use any spare interrupts you have to get them. That dispel, you want to get it quickly. It also puts healing absorbs on your group, so you want to make sure healers, when you get that dispel, one, do it quick, and two, be ready to actually heal up the healing absorbs. And then the big one is Obsidian Beam. A lot of tanks don't realize this is also a tank buster. The first hit of Obsidian Beam is quite large on the tank specifically. And so you can see here, I have Barkskin running and I have my Scarab Absorb up for that initial hit, just to help with it a little bit. And you will always want to have some defensive coverage for it. Flying your right way here, going back, try and get back as quickly as possible so you don't get spammed on too heavily. And then it just repeats from there, right? Like, you want your range again to bait far away, and this is the problem, right? If we have one range too close, we had one range far away, we now have to move kind of aggressively away. And this is what would happen if you had only one range, or if you had people not baiting properly. So every time range get in here, try and move up and try and group up, because again, that even gives you even more space, right? If you have both your range on top of each other, spawn both of these portals on top of one spot, you have so much room, and that's how I recommend handling that. Now this boss is going to die, and we're going to fly down to the church. See, we're pinging. This is how I always recommend pathing in this dungeon. I recommend starting here, pulling a couple packs outside of the church, then going inside the church, and this will get you pretty much all the count you need in the dungeon. And so the mob spawn right there, so be careful. That's why the whole party is back there, because the mob spawn right there. Double tactician. Tacticians are nice because they're basically only tank damage. So if your tank can handle them, you're fine, and no one else is really in danger. They have a tank targeted frontal as well, so you need to make sure you're pointing them away from your group. The big thing is that potentially, if you're scared of these tacticians, is when they enrage, they get this pretty nasty damage amp. I can't remember the exact number. It's very large, this one here, but they also slow themselves, right? So what you can do if you are worried about the tactician damaging your tank here is you can do a bit of a kite. It's quite easy because they're slowed from that enrage effect. But you can see here, I just kind of soothe one on cooldown, and at least at this key level, it doesn't seem too bad. Potentially, again, if you go up into the 12 area with the extra scaling factor, it can get more and more scary. But at least on this key level, just kind of soothing one on cooldown whenever they all got enraged, I was more than fine on this pull when I had Incarn running. And then we're going to do another pull here with a few more tacticians after we've killed all this stuff. So we do make sure we kill these tacticians down, and then I chain the pull afterwards, moving all the way to the entrance here. Because again, look, this was 2 tacticians in that pack, right? So a lot of these pulls are tactician heavy here to emphasize the danger on the tank specifically. So your tank's going to need a lot of help here. Healers, be aware of that. Use externals, use defensives. And again, if you are scared, if you are running low on things, do not be afraid to kite, because the tacticians with their enrage are quite easy to kite. Yeah, this is a double tactician, double shadow walker pull. So the Umbral Rush is another tank target ability. That one's a shadow hit. And so again, focusing this pull dangerousness on the tank specifically, taking out a lot of the random target damage with just the one singular dark caster here, and then the purple guy who puts out a dot on a random player. You can see here, I'm running low on defensive, so I start kiting a little bit, right? Like I was saying, I kited until I got my defensives back, and now I'm safe again for another like 20-ish seconds here because I got to Rage of the Sleeper, and that's going to let me get to Barkskin. Boom, I popped it and had to do a small kite in between there. I did lose it for a little bit. A little bit poor positioning with the frontals here because of that kiting, so just be aware of that. You know, if you do have to do this kiting, the frontals sometimes can get a little scary if you don't give yourself enough space. What I probably should have done is continued around this way instead of just doing this weird flip and this short angle flip and make it a little dangerous for my range. Could have just gone a little bit further, and that would have been fine, but it's not the end of the world. Main thing is, though, do not be afraid to kite like you saw there until you have defensives available. And at this point, there's only one tactician, so it's not a big deal. But you know, I'm out of CDs, or I'm holding CDs at this point for the next pack, so I don't want to make sure I have to commit anything for this. Then we go into the church here, and at this point you can kind of do differing things depending on your CDs. We don't have a ton, I believe, going into this, or no, we do have stuff going into this. So what I probably should have done is also chained the mini boss into this, because I also had Incarn and all that stuff going into it. So it probably would have been a pretty good value pull to you know, pull the mini boss in here, get some good damage. So it's fine. We didn't have Lust. This is also kind of where you would have Lust. If we had Lust here, because if we had Lusted that first pull, 100%, that mini boss is coming into this pull. We're popping our CDs. We're popping our Bloodlust. That is a huge, huge, huge value thing. But because we did that delayed Lust, we don't have it. Your group, good chance you do have your Lust for this, and that's the kind of goal of this route, is to have your Lust on this mini boss to either pull this trash pack or the trash pack outside of the church in front of it onto the mini boss with Lust with CDs. That is the goal of this route's Lust timings. So we kind of chain in when it's low health because we have CDs running here. They just kind of melt on the way over though. Use the corner in the room here. Again, big thing is try with this ability if you can to give your DPS, your melee DPS, a little bit of space just to actually hit the mob still. I'll talk more about that on the second boss. But if you're a tank here getting that big knockback debuff and you're not backing up too much, it can be very, very painful for your melee DPS, right? So try and give them a little bit of space at least so they can have some uptime. I think I pushed myself too far back into the corner for this one, and I'm not going to be able to give them a lot of space, which is unfortunate. Yeah, it's like I try and move back up into the corner, but I didn't give them enough space initially, so that is a problem. So you see me there backing up a little bit, and then we're going to add the pack here outside. Yeah, there we go. We're going to add the pack here when I have defensives running. And again, I back up into the corner. They have to back up a little bit, but they're able to still get most of their uptime on. And again, I do a much better job of that on the boss. So I can show you that when the boss goes in. And again, you would either ideally have lust on this or have lust on the previous pull if you're doing this into the mini boss here, just to get some good value off in terms of cooldown timing and all that stuff. But this is, again, a lot of tank damage in the two shadow walkers and the mini boss who does tank damage, but also there is a bit of random damage from these shadows, right? And eventually, if they do end up going down and living long enough, they do this Dark Flows cast, which is a new ability that I didn't see all of beta. Maybe it was there, but never saw it. So be aware of that damage if you don't kill them fast enough. And then we go straight. You can see right here, we land right on top of this mini boss. Double tactician mini boss pull here. I think we actually make a mistake. I think we accidentally pull these guys down here, and I end up dying from it, I think. So be careful if you are not ready. Again, doing the same soothing here. But the issue is with this kind of pull area, you don't really have the ability to kite, right? Because you're kind of stuck here. And so, yeah, we pull those, which is not ideal. I'm pretty sure I pulled it with a mouse over. So be very, very careful at this point. And the problem is I overlap my CDs here. As you see, I had Barkskin and Rage of the Sleeper at the same time, and that ends up getting me killed, basically. So be aware of that. Don't overlap your CDs, especially when you have 4 mobs that are just, dumping on your tank. Not ideal for sure. The mini boss just does group damage, but still, it's not ideal. And yeah, I end up falling down there, but it's okay. We end up getting the pack down. Watch that. If it does happen, just make sure you don't overlap your CDs, but it's okay. And then that pack dies, so we end up going to the next area here, which is down the last mini boss. Actually, yeah, so apparently, I guess if you fly through things, they don't reset in this dungeon, so be aware of that. I think we get like half the dungeon pulled in on us and we die because someone was flying over and they accidentally pulled something. And at this point, I think we have lust. I don't remember if we rip lust here. I think we save it for the boss. So we kill the random target damage guys initially, and then you've just got, again, the tactician up alive, and the damage at this point is prioritized on this the mini boss. This is a visual bug, by the way. This giant orb, it confused our group here a little bit, but this giant orb is a visual bug. This is not, it still has the same hitbox as normal. It just looks massive for some reason. So like you can see here, like I'm standing what appears to be in the hitbox, but I don't take the dot, right? So be aware of that. It can also be harder to aim because it's kind of harder to see, which is what happens there. We didn't quite aim it out of the city. We aimed it into the wall slightly. So be aware. Make sure you are always aiming this orb directly out of the city. And there's the normal size orb. Yeah, for some reason, sometimes this orb looks giant. Don't be scared. The hitbox is still normal. The hitbox is not giant. The visual just becomes giant for some reason. So that is it for this mini boss. And then we have them all dead. So we can now go straight to the boss, who is now stationary. Right? I know it was unsure if that would be stationary. It was changed on, I think, the week before the season started or something like that. And you actually have more than enough room to just fight this boss without clearing any trash. You don't need to clear any trash around it at all. You have the mobs up here. You have the mobs around the fountain. You have this guy there. If you're really worried, you can kill that guy there. But it's unnecessary because you have enough space to do this boss. I'm going to pull this boss a little bit away from the fountain, because there are some plaques in the fountain. And I'm going to face towards the fountain as a tank. Now, if you are a paladin who does not have the ability to drop the slam, you can instead position on this side and just get kicked into this house. So that's totally fine. Just get kicked into this house and you're good. Every other tank has a way to actually prevent the slam knockback, right? You've got charges, you've got leaps, you've got transcend, and you've got death advance. So every other tank can face this way and not have to worry about getting knocked through other packs behind them. And that leaves the entire party available to stand on this side of the boss and just aim the orb outside of the city. So no trash needs to be killed in this area. And again, Big visual here, it's still the same small hitbox. Don't worry about the anytime you get a big visual. And when the slam goes out, you see I just back up a little bit there, and that gives melee the ability to have full uptime on the boss. His melee did not need to move at all. The only person that needed to move was the dragon who had just breathed through the boss. So there's that. But melee don't need to move if the tank just takes a few steps backwards. And again, if you're a tank with a gap closer, no issues, right? There's no problems for that with that at all. And I just step forward a little bit to get aggro on those shadows when they spawn. Everyone's playing relatively close to the boss, so I don't have to move too much. And then again, slam comes out, take a few steps back, let melee have uptime, and just charge right back to the boss. And that's just rinse and repeat from there. Defensiveness, obviously shadowy decay is the big scary thing. Healers, you need to make sure you have some sort of throughput available every single cast. And players that have personals, that's what you would want to do that. Now, you won't necessarily be able to personal every single time. You won't necessarily be able to CD every time because it's on a short 30-second cooldown. But that is where you would want to at least stagger those kinds of abilities, because outside of that, the big damage is the orb, which at least on this key level wasn't one-shotting us from the detonation at this area. And so really all we were scared about is if any of these kicks went off or the shadowy decay killing us, right? So as long as you keep these mobs together, cleave them down quickly, keep them kicked or CC'd, you're not really having too many problems. And they die very quickly, as you saw there. Their health is quite low, and that's really this boss fight. Just rotating through those things. There's quite a bit of damage going out, but look at this. This is kind of the scary part with the orb detonating with the shadowy decay, and that's where we have like spirit links. We have darknesses, we have personals, all those kinds of things, just to make those moments a little bit easier. And again, the uptime thing here with the tank slam, very, very valuable as well. From here, we just fly straight up back to the blimp. You got the Dark Architect. This guy spawns ads at 75, 50, and 25% health. The ads are all weak. They're like giga weak. They still have abilities and stuff like that. You can still pick them up and whatever. But generally, you're more scared of this Tormenting Eruption cast than anything else. And so just put all your prior damage into the Architect. Don't worry about these other mobs. And also be aware of this side of the ship. This here, if you're facing the front of the ship, it's the right side of the ship. That's where the boss is always going to spawn. So you're going to see here, we ping it, we move away from that side of the boss because we don't want to instantly pull the boss. We want to make sure we're fully prepared. People get a sip, whatever, and then we're good to go straight into the final boss here. Pretty straightforward. Your damage is relevant, but not super important in this phase. Basically, the boss phase transitions at 64%. And the bombs deal a set amount of damage. I think it's like 5.8% health, max health percent, or some weird number like that. I think it's 5.8. And so basically, the lowest you can get this boss with the bombs is 62.5, and that basically means you're doing 2 sets of bombs. No matter the key level, you're just doing 2 sets of bombs, and that's what kills this boss. And so because of that, your DPS is not super relevant, right? So you should have DPS doing the bombs here. You should have DPS, being aware of the acid sprays, dodging the webs, whatever, because healers have a lot to handle in this phase, right? The erosive spray stacks up. The rolling acid is very scary. The bombs have a debuff on them. So healers have a lot to actually do in this phase specifically, whereas DPSers, your damage done is kind of irrelevant almost in this boss phase. It has some relevance. Like I said, you want to get the boss. It's like a very small percentage to make sure that 6 bombs is enough to actually push this boss and push the boss to 62.5 specifically, because that's the cap that bombs can do. So you can actually trigger the next phase at 62.5 instead of 64 if you do it with a bomb, and that is how to min max, I guess, the duration of the last phase to get the boss as low as possible. And so give your healers a break here. Don't make them run around and collect bombs. They have a lot to heal. DPS, just do that. This, of course, the green side of this wave is where the wave actually points, and the player themselves can never actually dodge the wave. At least in our experience, they get stunned, they get the dot, so be aware of that. And again, so this is where I think we didn't quite time the bombs correctly. I think we might have had one more bomb on the platform, I think. Yeah, so ideally here, I believe it's 62.5. It might be 63.5 as low. No, I think it's 62.5. So you want to try and push the bomb as low as possible, the boss as low as possible here. So this is going to be a pretty long phase because we didn't get to do that. Notably here, you can see too, we just fly straight to the actual end platform. You don't need to follow the boss. All you need to look at is your holy buff. So if depends on where the boat is positioned when this phase happens. So you can see we have our holy buff. You see I'm going to the city. I realize I still have a full duration holy buff. Now it starts ticking. That's more than enough time. But sometimes if your boat's on the far side or over here, it starts ticking at like this point and you're not this close to the thing already, right? So you need to make sure if you're far from the actual endpoint, you actually fly through the city until you're like down here on the bottom left. And that is the point at which your debuff will go to the ticking down from 9 seconds, and then you can go straight to the end. In general, though, just good to note, you don't need to follow the boss. You can get there way earlier, and this lets you know guarantee the kick. And now we literally AFK here for like 30 seconds waiting for the boss to happen. Maybe they'll put a kill wall there. That'll be funny. But yeah, now we have this quite long boss phase because we didn't quite get the bomb in at the right time. If we had thrown a double bomb at the same time at the end there, that would have done the double damage and triggered this to 62.5. But because we only put one at a time in at the end, we have an extra 1.3% boss HP, which is quite a lot of HP, right? Because this boss ends at like just below 60%. So this phase is going to be a little longer. In general, not too much to worry about. The new mechanic is spinneret strands here. You just spread them out here. Insta snap, the damage isn't too bad from that. And otherwise, it's pretty much the exact same. Make sure with the rolling acid doesn't move so far that they don't hit these puddles when they get the debuff, because that does make them significantly smaller when they get hit. Otherwise, it's just basically the same as the first phase, right? A ton of damage going out from the erosive, from the rolling acid, for the individual player hit. So that's when you would probably want to pop a defensive. The spinneret strands is relatively minor damage overall, but again, the individual hit from the strands is what's scary, so potentially you would want to personal that as well as the targeted player. But there we have it, guys. That's my walkthrough of the Dawnbreaker on a +10. Hopefully this helps you out, and if it did, be sure to like and subscribe for more content like it. Let me know down in the comments below too what other forms of videos you'd like to see this season. As always, I have to give a shout out to all of my amazing Patreons for their support, and I'll see everyone in the next video.